Welcome to the Deer Wizard Podcast, conversation shaping the deer industry. I'm your host, Josh Newton, the Deer Wizard. Through interviews, advocacy, and industry news, we deliver field-proven insights to help producers build better herds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Deer Wizard Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Newton. For nearly 3 decades, I've worked in the cervid industry with deer and elk producers across North America, really focusing on herd health, management, and science behind raising and understanding these incredible animals. This podcast is where we bring people together from all aspects of the deer world, hunters, farmers, biologists, industry voices, to have honest conversations about hunting and deer. Today's guest is someone many of you know already. Steven Ziegler is the voice behind Rack Junkies, one of the most outspoken and widely followed independent platforms in the whitetail hunting community. He covers issues from land access and management to the ongoing debate around chronic wasting disease. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions and engage on wildlife policy. We'll talk about how Rack Junkies came to be, the current state of deer and deer hunting, and we'll dive into chronic wasting disease, the disease, and the policy surrounding it. I hope you enjoy the show. Steven, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I had come across Rack Junkies. I had seen it for the past couple of years, and then I started diving into it. And of course, you've had some outspoken stance on wildlife management, specifically in the CWD space. And I want to dive into that because you've been doing a lot of good work, kind of uncovering a lot of we'll call it the behind the scenes nature of what CWD looks like, not the disease necessarily, but the policies that are instituted around it. And I want to take a deep dive with you on that. But if you would first, can you just give the audience a little bit of background on yourself, kind of, maybe your young childhood days, kind of growing up, where this basis for the love of the outdoors came from?
So basically, I grew up hunting with my dad and my grandpa. My grandma taught shooting safety sports, and she taught me how to shoot. And then we just went out, squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting, and then it turned into deer hunting and all that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of because of doing it, family tied all around it, is how I came to love hunting. But what happened with how I got into the social media side was we just tried to become famous rabbit hunting YouTubers, just recording stuff, having fun.
Sure.
And then I filmed a video of my grandma at 80 years old shooting a deer with a crossbow. That went kind of viral. Ted Nugent shared it. We started a whole website, thehuntingnews.com. And it was just a hobby that we were hoping to make enough money to buy our rabbit hunting shells. From there, it was Wax Star Hunters, which was kind of a shout out to Ted Nugent at the time.
Sure.
And my business partner, he had a raccoon stuck upside down in a tank. Now this video today has between all platforms 100 million views.
Oh wow.
He yanks it out and just launches it because he can't hold on to an angry raccoon. Mm-hmm. And it went viral, and we ended up having 30,000 people that loved raccoons following us and 6,000 hunters. And so it destroyed our page. And that's when we started Rack Junkies and the hunting news. And then my business partner, he actually runs the Sportsman Party on Facebook. So we have a series of pages, and we've kind of figured out the algorithms. And, over that was about 10 years ago now. So we've been doing this for 10 years. We film, hunting companies, we film hunting products, and I basically just sit around reading research, talking to people, and writing about it. It's way better than working in a factory, Mm-hmm. So now that we understand the algorithms, and, I've had the opportunity now to go hunting places, and just you get to hunt a lot more. And this is what I do full time, along with my fishing lure company, DeLong. That was actually the guy who invented the rubber worm for fishing, was David
Mm-hmm.
DeLong. And he was from Akron, Ohio, like I am. So
Okay.
We bought this business, brought it back 4 years ago. And now we just, we run a fishing lure company, and we read and we write all day long, kind of like I'm in school, but it's about things that I like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's awesome. It's interesting. I'm curious your take. Social media is integrated into the fabric of our lives, right? People just get their news in different ways now. How has that taken on new life in your case? What does that look like? Kind of, we'll call it pre-Facebook, YouTube, et cetera, even though those are pretty old platforms. They've definitely expanded reach and scope of things. What's that look like for you?
It's kind of crazy because now, back in about September, October, our pages went from about 80 to 100 million views a month to around 300 million views a month. So when you start getting that level of reach, you start ruffling some feathers. And here's one thing that, like, I don't take any sponsorships. Like, nobody pays me. I mean, I get, like, Facebook content pays, but I don't make any money from sponsors. I get some stuff for free that I test out, but I've avoided that because I have a real problem with authority in general. Like, I don't like anyone telling me what to say or what to write. So I want to write about whatever I want to write about. And that's kind of how the CWD thing took off, was just because I noticed, I was like, I don't know a lot about this. I know just kind of the vague talking points from both sides, but I'm not an expert on it, but something didn't make sense to me. I was like, there's something isn't right. So that's when I went and started reading all the research papers, the Wyoming study, I think we talked right before we started about Illinois and stuff like that. And the Arkansas study. I started just diving in because I actually, the first post I did on this, very interesting. I knew something didn't make sense. So I took a picture of that famous deer from I think it's New York Times article where they said the deer zombie disease is coming. And they posted a picture of a deer with EHD. I used that picture and wrote EHD. And then I Googled healthiest deer ever. And I just took a picture of it and wrote CWD on it and then wrote 2 paragraphs. Yeah, listen, admittedly, it's a little bit of a trolly thing, but I was like, this doesn't make sense. It reached I think 13 or 14 million people. And I was like, oh, this is something that I'm not the only one that thinks this now. So I kind of took a step back and that's when I really dove into the research, was at that point. Because like I said, I'm not a biologist, but I also know that what I'm seeing and what the average everyday guy is seeing doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah. What do you think motivated you to start kind of speaking out about these kind of hunting issues?
So like I said, I'm very much I'm even in the political world here in Ohio with state reps and stuff like that. So I kind of enjoy that world and I hunt, right? I mean, I see these policies start to come to Ohio, and I know that at the beginning there was this whole push of all the CWDs coming from these high fence deer farms. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They've got the disease and they're spreading it. That's a problem. That was my thought. I mean, that was just the narrative. And then I looked into it, and I realized this positive CWD case that they found was 40 miles from the high fence deer place. I'm like, oh, hold on. Somebody's lying to me about something. And like I said a minute ago, I got a problem with authority. I don't like people lying to me. I don't like if something doesn't make sense, I'm going to dive into it. And one important note here about all this for me personally, if you follow my pages long enough, you'll see me, if I get something wrong, I'll write about that more than anything else. I did this on, because I also run the hunting news with coy dogs, where I wrote something and I was just wrong. And I had some biologists reach out. I talked to them for hours, and I spent 2 weeks writing about what I got wrong, because I'm not on either side in this case. I'm not on the side of the game agencies. I'm not on the side of, a lot of these deer farmers. They call me a lot because, they're very passionate about this issue because I mean, it's affecting their businesses. People are losing their businesses because of this. So it's more of me just wanting to get to the truth. And that's why I've really dove into this topic. And, I'm not one to avoid controversy, because most of these, big platforms and big names in our community can't tackle these issues because they have, they're making their money from sponsors. I'm not. So I have the unique ability to just go after what's right and what's wrong and not have to worry about it.
Unbridled and unchained. I like it. Yeah. What did you have an aha moment where you were like, the hunters are really paying attention to this? What was that?
There was 2 actually. The first one was that first initial post I wrote. But after I did that, I put up a poll, and it's a Facebook poll, so it's not an official poll, but it can give you self-reported data. They talk about epidemiological studies all the time, and if you see overwhelming data, then that's what you start looking into. They did this with cigarettes, where it was hey, there's 10 times more cancer of people who smoke cigarettes than people who don't. So we need to study this more scientifically. I put up an unofficial Facebook poll, and it was just real simple. Do you support how your game agencies are handling CWD? And the answers were yes, no, and I don't know. I kind of went into it assuming like, okay, I'm betting you it's 60% are going to say no, or 60% are going to say they're not handling it well. Probably 30% will say they're handling it well, and 10% will be unsure, something like that. That's what I said before I posted it. That's what I thought. 1,000 votes. It was 96% no, 4% unsure, and out of 1,000 votes, 8 said yes. And I clicked on every one of those 8 profiles. Every one of those 8 profiles worked for a game agency at some point. And I was like, oh, this is an official poll, but this is something that everybody is thinking and feeling, but it's not being articulated online yet. At least not in the amongst the general, I know inside of the high fence, the deer farmers communities, like a lot of them were talking about it, but your everyday guy wasn't talking about it at all. Or, they're just like, this is kind of a hassle, but it wasn't a popular issue. And I realized real quick, those 2 instances I would say were the real aha moments for me.
When you look at deer hunting, what do you think some of the biggest changes that you've seen over the past, 15, 20 years to that kind of average day guy that he likes to go out and he lives for hunting season each year? He takes his week off work, he does the opening day, or he's a bow hunter. What do you think the biggest changes have been?
There's been a couple. One. Well, I'll start with a negative one. I live in Ohio. There's a lot of private land, not a lot of public land. There's been a lot of shift towards leases where guys are, they're not letting as many people hunt, and so it's a little bit harder to access. Also, there's better management for big bucks. A guy leases out, like this happened right by me. He leases about 1,000 acres that we used to be able to hunt half of it, and now we can't. And it's just 2 dudes hunting 1,000 acres, big bucks running everywhere, which actually does help our property because they come onto our property too.
Sure.
But, I would say access is a big negative one. For the average everyday guy, I think that there's been more of a push, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I don't know, but it seems, at least from the social media side, I see that there's more of a push towards bow hunting. There's a lot more disagreements, and which, again, I know a lot of people get mad at me when I say this, but I'm all for disagreements. I think that's how you learn. Like, let's talk about it. I'm not worried about anti-hunters if we're talking about crossbows versus compounds. Like no anti-hunter goes, oh man, look at those guys arguing about what bows they use. Let's shut down hunting. So it's so I'm not really worried about it, but I would say that there's more information out there as well. So there's like a more dedicated group, like a smaller dedicated group of people hunting bigger bucks. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think that the only bad thing is it's harder to access land right now, at least in Ohio. I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania. Is it different there?
We're seeing, I think across the country, you can say access is becoming more and more limited. And I think a lot of that is through situations like the one you just described, right? And you have folks that they're leasing up this ground, or in our state, public land continues to grow. So the largest landholder in the state of Pennsylvania is the Pennsylvania Game Commission. They got 2 million acres of public ground. And so that's been kind of a core of their doctrine. I mean, they're the largest timber contractor. They're the largest oil and gas holder. They're the largest landholder. That's a state agency. And so, like, they have a 600 million. I call it a slush fund. They don't call it a slush fund, but they have a $600 million slush fund. $600 million.
Wow.
Their gas leases last year were like $200 million. They can, that's power. They can do whatever they want with that, right? And so they do a good job at trying to buy up land. Now, Pennsylvania is not like Ohio, right? Like Ohio has a lot more farm ground than we do. 68% of the state of Pennsylvania is covered in trees. Like it's a pretty mountainous. You get outside of Southeast PA and like there, like the Appalachians just cut right through the center of PA. So developing what I consider quality hunting ground is hard. Like it's a lot of mountain hunting, and that's kind of built into the tradition here. But it's public land access is not, I wouldn't say limited, but private land access, like you see that everywhere, right? Everywhere in every state, just more and more land's getting bought up. I mean, the old adage is they're not making any more of it, right?
Yep.
So curious what you what do you think your biggest concerns for the future of deer hunting are?
Man, obviously the easy one to say there is the recruitment. Kids not getting into hunting. I think that's definitely a big one. A lot of kids don't have the patience, and I see that problem getting worse over time because like I've got a 9-year-old son, and I didn't grow up with social media. I didn't grow up with a phone in my hand, and the attention spans I don't see getting better. So when you're hunting, you got to kind of sit there and be patient and just sit. And I think that will be a challenge. I also think that like access is a bit of a challenge too. I would say that on the preventable side, and again, I'm not 100% on where I stand on every CWD issue, but I know a lot of people are scared about somebody contracting CWD and completely wiping out hunting. And to the game agency's points, which I generally disagree with them, if somebody did contract CWD, they do have a point that everybody would be. I don't know what would happen to hunting at that point. However, based on the science, we know that the base proteins don't line up on that. So nobody's ever contracted CWD. So I'm not personally worried about that one, but that is, if I know we're talking a lot about CWD here, so I wanted to kind of mention it. Other than that, I think that hunting has a good future. Like social media has a positive impact sometimes if done right. And I try my best, and I fall short sometimes, to highlight some of the more fun aspects of hunting and how to get kids into hunting. And I actually did a video back in October. My daughter shot a 10-point. And after she shot it, she's sitting there in the tree stand, curling her eyelashes, getting ready for her pictures. And I recorded the whole thing. She looks up and sees me. She's like, "Dad, stop! Dad, stop!"
Yeah.
It goes mega viral. Like I said, like 14 million views. And so, I mean, you can have fun with kids out there. And this is an encouraging part. A lot of people reach out to me all the time. Your kids are into hunting. How do I get my kids into hunting? And I would say for example, my daughter, it was easy. She loved being around family. She loved going out. My son, he was just not interested at first. And then a year ago, I just handed him a BB gun. And next thing you know, like the kid just he's like, "Dad, let's go hunting. Let's go hunting." He just, I mean, I had to have some conversations about, possibly, not shooting certain birds. There's
sure.
I mean, not admitting to anything, but I think a lot of us went through that.
Yep.
A lot of us had that conversation from our parents. But to the concerns of the future of hunting, it's basically recruitment. That's the big one, I think.
Yeah, the societal shift away from like our kind of. It's like I think it's embedded in our DNA, right? Like I've heard Ranella say many times, like to not hunt is a new thing, right? Up until just a couple hundred years ago, if you didn't hunt, you died, or if you didn't know a hunter, you died. And so that existence was for most of our existence on this planet. And it's a new thing. So I can definitely recognize, and like certainly the wildlife agencies have a big challenge with that recruitment and trying to engage hunters and encourage, you call it a behavior, right? Encourage that behavior and that tradition, right? And I obviously I don't have the answers for it, but it certainly seems like an uphill battle. You got these things are a blessing and a curse all at the same time, right?
Agreed.
And it's hard to know what the right path is, but it's something I think we can all work on together, right? Like, because almost all the hunters I know, like, they're passionate about it, right? They just like being outside. It's not about killing deer, but they just enjoy being out in nature. And so, however we need to support that, we should as a community, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I want to dive into this CWD conversation because I've enjoyed a lot of your content. I saw your interview with it's Jason Sumners from MDC, and I thought that was an interesting conversation. It's always kind of fun to watch how wildlife agencies interact with media, and to get a long form interview like that with him was really good. What do you think some of your kind of key takeaways were from that?
Well, I want to say this one thing to start it is that on the CWD side, I've talked to a bunch of people that are against these policies and only one that's for them. And that's Jason Sumners. And that's not because of, and trust me, I get this comment a lot from the we'll call it the pro game agency side, is them saying, oh, well, you're not talking to the scientists and you're not talking to these people. I've put out an open call in that video with him on Facebook that's reached millions of people saying, I will talk to anyone. If you disagree, I'm more interested in talking to you than anybody else, because that's how I learn.
Yep.
And so far, I have a conversation tomorrow with one guy, and he's the first one other than Jason Sumners to reach out and actually say he would talk to me. All these biologists, it's like I get 300 million views a month. I've even told them, you can write whatever you want and I will post it on my page. I will post your side. I'm not one-sided on this. And they still won't take me up on it. And that's maybe the most convincing thing to me, that they don't have science, or they don't have a compelling argument to justify all the policies that they're putting in place. Even with Jason Sumners, when I talked to him, he only talked to me because I wrote that the MDC had given $500,000 to the National Deer Association. And then an employee from the MDC immediately moves over to the National Deer Association as a deer outreach specialist in Missouri, pushing all of the policies that Jason Sumners wants. And I'm not claiming this to be illegal, but it's corrupt. Like, you're funding NGOs. We see this, and this is what's happening in this country. If you read the news, you'll see this all over the place. So I guess with the CWD stuff, I don't know how to even engage with the other side because they won't talk to me. And I mean, what am I supposed to think? What would you think if everybody talking to you is on one side? It really reeks of COVID, where the trust the science, believe the science. It's like, okay, well, talk to us about it. And there's no conversation. And listen, if anybody's listening to this, it's still an open invitation. I will let the other side write their own articles and post it on my platform. I will give them more leeway than anybody. And I even bet you after this and all the posts I've done, they still won't take me up on it. And that's probably the most frustrating thing for me, as somebody who tries to be as, not even fair. I guess the better way is to say, I want to be right. So I want to look into both sides to make sure, I can't figure out where I'm wrong. And, I can't be more right unless I figure out where I'm wrong. And that's what I'm trying to find out. But none of these people talk to me. So what do you do here?
Well, I've been in the deer industry for almost 30 years, and I live that reality. So, like, wildlife agencies. So, just for full disclosure, like, I raise whitetail deer, and like we have a stocking program, and that's all based around genetics and hunting. Like, that's the backbone of what I do. And for me, there has been 20 years of nonstop criticism, maybe hate. I don't know. It's hard to, know someone's mind or feelings, but the wildlife agencies and various, we'll call them wildlife groups, they hate what I do. That's obvious because I can see it through the policies that are put in place or the public criticism. And instead of having a conversation and engaging on, what those call them truths are, right? Because there's this discussion, and we're going to get into this. This discussion about chronic wasting disease is full of nuance. Yes. It is in depth, and there's two sides of it, right? You have the disease itself, and then you have the policy. And the policy is where almost all of the nuance is. Or at least that's how I see it, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But the disease is used as a hammer or a cudgel to beat down anybody that opposes it. It's and you've mentioned COVID. It does. It reeks a lot of COVID. And we can say that with some confidence because it's easy to look back on things and see how stuff played out, right? Because, when COVID came out, I suspect like most people, everybody was like, what is this, right? We didn't know. Well, we know now. Like, yeah. It's obvious. Everybody knows. So what do you think the first time that CWD kind of popped up on your radar and really kind of gave you a smack in the face?
It was the first time that it popped up in Ohio, and that was like 8 to 10 years ago, I think. I don't even really remember, but it was where I was like, this is coming from game farms, and that was the narrative, and I just kind of believed it.
Sure.
Like, well, if they're coming from game farms, shut them down.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm not risking my hunting for this.
Yep.
Obviously I've learned since then that's not true, but that was the first time it popped up on my radar. The first time it really smacked me in the face was a couple years ago, I would say. There was another instance where I saw, it might have been Ted Nugent or, some sort of big name talking about how it wasn't what people were saying. And I didn't tackle it at that point, but that was the next time. And then the third would have been when I really got into it, probably about August or September of this last year. And then I wrote that post in October, I believe it was, about CWD versus EHD, and it got 14 million views. And just going through the comments, I realized like, oh, this is something that everybody recognizes that something's not right here. That was the big aha moment for me, was that it was the comment section actually of that article, not even the article itself. It was me realizing, oh, I'm not alone on this. Like, it was me realizing, I think that 80 to 90% of hunters are either don't know or like, this doesn't make sense. And maybe they still stand on the side of game agencies' policies because they're scared, but it doesn't make sense to people. That was the big one for me, was back in October.
Yeah. Why do you think CWD is such a controversial topic?
Because people love deer hunting. I think I think that both sides genuinely do love deer hunting. I think both sides want what's best for the deer herd. I put a post up on this, last week saying, I'm not on the side of, the CWD policies and the game agencies, and I'm not on the other side either. I'm on the side of my kids and my grandkids that aren't even born yet. And there's years before they're born. That's the side that I'm on. I want to preserve hunting for them, which we talked about earlier. One of the biggest threats to hunting is, your recruitment. Yeah. I'm on their side, even, future generations that, my great grandkids, I want them to have these opportunities too. And, that's kind of why I think it's so controversial, is because people are passionate about protecting the deer herd on both sides. And I actually believe that these game agencies think that what they're doing is the right call. I never attribute malice towards them. I don't. But again, that goes right back to the thing that we talked about a minute ago. Why won't they talk to us? And I think that that's one of the frustrations on kind of my side of this, that makes me real passionate about it, is that I can't get answers.
Yeah. It's interesting, the comment about them not talking to us. Like I've been to many CWD seminars for hunters by our Pennsylvania Game Commission, where they do hunter outreach programs, right? And they just want to inform the local kind of community in a county, and sometimes they're hosted by a representative, right? Because there's that political tie. And generally speaking, it's a well-attended event. There's usually between 100 or 200 kind of local hunters there, and it's a fairly intimate setting, so there's good kind of Q&A. But I watch it from my perspective, and I'm sure that I, generally speaking, know a lot more about the whole landscape, because I have seen both sides, right? I've seen the farmed industry side, and I've also seen the wildlife side. So I have that context there, and I sit there and I watch a game agency, they'll put up a study, and the study will be, hey, macaw monkeys are very similar in DNA to a human. They're probably the closest thing on the planet, and they get CWD. And I go and I look at that, and I'm like, they were fed like brain matter from something directly, and then intracranial injected, and a prion formed. And it's like, are we doing that to humans? Why are you scaring these people? Right? Because if what they say is true, and they need to operate these call programs, which I am like not in favor of and incredibly skeptic of how they're implemented, one, and what the actual effect is other than killing off the deer herd. Like, why is it that we're driving hunters out of the woods? They are the most important conservation tool they have. They raise the money. They keep the population in check. All the things that the agency wants them to do. And we're like, hey, don't eat those deer because you might get CWD. It's just so counterintuitive. Have you seen similar things like that?
Oh, definitely. And I even made a video of me eating some CWD positive meat. I was like, look, I'll eat it. Like but even the people who won't, I don't even think that's a good, I heard Steve Rinella say this. I like Steve Rinella, but he's, I don't take people serious unless they're willing to eat the meat. It's like, I don't think that's a very good,
No.
I actually don't agree with that, because these game agencies, like you said, are scaring people.
Yeah.
And, and it's just because deer can have CWD and nobody's gotten it. I understand the fear, because the fear has been pushed. And like you said, with that monkey study, when I looked into that, I was like, why are we even letting them do this?
Mhm.
Because it seems like a good way to, Wuhan lab this thing. And like, like if they're that close to us and we're forcing them to get CWD, I don't know why, like, shouldn't everybody, even the game agencies, be against even letting them do those studies? I thought it seems like gain of function research to me.
Sure. It's got that feel, no doubt.
Listen, I'm not a biologist, but I don't like that, and I guarantee you the everyday guy is pretty much against that too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I stand on the fear mongering of this thing. But it is a political tool, and that's something that that was interesting. You brought up politics, state reps and things like that. I'm actually here in Ohio involved with state reps and stuff. They follow my personal page. I'm friends with them. I work on elections. Like Secretary of State guy I'm helping right now, state rep last time. And so I have their phone numbers. I can talk to them. And that is the one way that that things can actually be changed. Because you got to remember, these state reps are at these fancy dinner parties, and they're at these fundraisers on rooftop bars in downtown. And those hunting politicians, the people in charge of the DNRs and all that, they are at those events too. So the state politicians have the influence of the game agencies all the time. And hunters always get mad when I bring this up, but if you want change, you have to be involved in the political process to some extent.
Yes.
You'd be surprised, because look, I was a campaign manager, and I'm going to be this time too, for a state rep here, Portage County. And she was, if she got 4 or 5 messages on one topic, just Facebook messages, she'd be calling me. Like, hey, Stephen, what's going on with this? What do you know about this? They'll call their legislative aides. Hey, is this going to be a problem? What's going on? It doesn't take much to get a state level politician's attention. And that's where I think the most effective way to fight this is saying, hey, just message your state representative or your state senator and say, listen, the game agencies are doing things I don't like. I know that you get to vote on these things and vote on budget bills and all that. Here's my perspective. I don't like them pushing these policies in my area. And if it just, you say it respectfully, you don't even have to write them a letter. Just get on their Facebook page and send them a message. That's all it takes. And you'd be surprised how much influence that has.
That's interesting. I have a very similar perspective. I have been trying to engage in the political arena for, about 15 years. And it's the thing that I enjoy least in my life. Because I got businesses to run, I got a family to raise, like those are the things that are important to me. But to make that change, for the things that you think are important to you, you have to engage in that political process. I'm curious how the oversight goes in the state of Ohio for the DNR or wildlife agencies on the political side. What does that look like? Because I know that's a challenge, or it appears to be a challenge. We see wildlife agencies, and I'll use this issue's kind of been close to me, even though it's geographically far away. Texas Parks and Wildlife, right? They seem to operate with near immunity and independence. And while I don't think that, I'm not a ballot box initiative wildlife management kind of guy, right? Like we see what's going on in Oregon currently. We see Colorado just degenerating into I don't know what, because it's foreign to me, right? And what does that look like in Ohio?
Ohio, it's kind of the same thing. They tend to not get a lot of pressure, and part of that's because hunters don't push back on hunters. They generally are the type of dude that just wants to be left alone, kind of like me. So they don't engage in the political process that much. And that gives the game agencies kind of, a free pass to do whatever they want, because there's no pressure on them. Also, the game agencies are also very I don't know how to say it, but they're a little shady with how they do things. Like here in Ohio, they sent out, letters to certain landowners, giving them 10 extra tags in certain areas, and try in these CWD areas. But they don't put that on their website. They don't put that out to the public. And in fact, they just released just a couple days ago their proposed tag limit changes and season dates and all that, and didn't say anything about the increased tags to depredation tags or to these out of season hunts for landowners in these CWD zones. They don't bring up any of that. It's just private letters to those people, and they kind of hide from it. And if look, we're so distracted in our society today anyway. We got a war in Iran, and the Epstein files, and there's and then a lot of us just watching hunting videos. We're not paying attention. And I think that a biggest reason why they're able to do that is because we're not paying attention. Not because we couldn't have influence. And I get it. And this is the hardest problem on the CWD side, in my opinion, to make any changes, is that hunters just kind of want to be left alone. And they don't. And in fact, Randy Newberg talks about this on his podcast, where he's like, guys, listen, you got to get involved, because I get it. You don't like this world. Like you said, you don't even like it. But sometimes you got to do things you don't like.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. I generally feel, and the way you mentioned Randy, the West and the East, Midwest, East, are very different, right? Like the culture is different, and that, like, it's what makes America just the greatest place on earth. Like, especially from a wildlife management side, like there's all these different interest groups trying to keep America alive and well in the hunting sense, right? Because it's a core foundation of our country. It just is, whether people like that or not. But like Reagan said, freedom's just a generation away from being lost, right? I'm paraphrasing. He said it better than I did. But we see that in the hunting space. And people just want to enjoy life. They don't want to have to consistently fight for a recreational activity or a lifestyle that is, I think to a lot of folks, just morally and ethically good. Right? There's so many bad things in the world. Hunting is not one of them. Enjoying the outside is not one of them. It's probably one of the best things you can do for your soul. Go outside, get some sunlight, enjoy. Right? And it's a little frustrating. Curious what your, just from a CWD policy side of things, what do you think is that kind of one thing that you find to be most detrimental?
Most detrimental is, and I don't have 100% proof if I'm right on this or not. I find the genetic side of this very interesting. I've been diving into this a lot. I know, was it Oklahoma that allowed for genetically deer that are less susceptible to getting CWD? I think it was Oklahoma that let people buy them and release them. Yeah. I'm always a little skeptical of messing with genetics, humans doing it. However, there was a study out of Illinois. I was at the SCI show in Nashville, and I forget the professor's name, but he did a big study and showed that in areas where there was CWD for a long time, that the genetics that were less susceptible to getting CWD were at 40% after 10 years. And don't quote me on these actual statistics, but you could see a huge increase. And he studied the alleles. He's a geneticist, actually. And, he was studying all these different markers. And he said, where the CWD's been for a long time, there's more deer with those markers. And with this whole kill the deer to save them idea, if there's prions in the ground, we can't get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And what I'm most concerned about is that with these game agencies coming in and just killing all these deer, you're resetting the genetics. So those genetics can't take over time, but you're getting more and more prions over time. So even if the game agencies are right on this, what I would be worried about happening is, when we finally go, hey, listen, this policy is not working. They just let the genetics take over, and eventually CWD will kind of work its way through. My concern is there's going to be so many prions, so many deer are going to get CWD so fast because none of them have, any sort of genetic markers to prevent them from getting it, or very few do. but there's going to be prions everywhere. And I know the whole prion discussion's, debatable as well. I don't know anything about that, just so, because I know there's people that listen to this, they'll be like, there's no such thing as a prion. Look, maybe I've heard them, I've talked to them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that would be my biggest concern is, are the game agencies actually hurting us more than they're helping us? And I think that best case scenario for the game agencies, it's not doing any good. I think worst case scenario is long term it'll make it worse. I don't see any. Jason Sumner said this to me. He's like it's interesting. We're in a spot right now where we don't have a long term solution, and I'm like, okay, so like that doesn't make sense to me. So what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Is this going to harm things over time? I think there's just as likely that their policies harm hunting as much as there is that they're not doing anything at all over time. That's my opinion. That's what I'm most concerned about.
Yeah. It's so the genetic conversation has been one that I've dove into real deep, right? And it's I've paid as close attention to that particular topic because it's at least a control mechanism for my place, right? And I'm able to look at these genetics, and there's kind of like a couple misnomers with what, let's just say, Oklahoma's doing, right? So when people say like we're messing with the genetics, no, we're just selecting for natural genetics, right? Like we're not doing the CRISPR tech, right? We're not yanking pieces of the chromosome out and splicing something else in there so they can't get it. These are just deer that are selected for a naturally recurring set of genes. And so like that's important, right? Like it's to say that what's existing in nature, we're helping, right? So because we can select for it. And Oklahoma, there's two parts, right? So and what this is one of the things that I have challenged with the wildlife agencies, because we've seen plenty of tenured professors say, okay, like this genetic thing's not going to work. And of course, NDA has been beating this drum relentlessly. I've seen Lindsey Thompson over there and Gip Adams. If these animals are less susceptible, they're going to get the disease and they're going to spread it around more.
One thing, let me interject one thing here real quick. National Deer Association gets the vast majority of their funding from government now. Like they got $5 million last year. They won't even release their actual membership numbers. Like 3 years ago, it was down to 4,000 from 70,000. So they've already lost 98% of the average everyday guy. So that's what I talked with Jason Sumners about. I put so little credibility into what National Deer Association says now, because hunters overwhelmingly voted with their dollars to say they don't represent us anymore. So I just want to say that I know they're beating that drum, and that's an important point to make. But I got a real problem with National Deer Association now. So sorry, I just wanted to interject that.
No, I appreciate that. And that's it's a great point. We'll get into the government funding of this whole apparatus, because it's super interesting how I think the system's been manipulated and corrupted to favor wildlife and game agencies. So we'll get to that. But the Oklahoma thing is so interesting, right? And like the legislators said, hey, what is this, right? And they took a dive on it, and they're like, oh, the genetics they're using are not these single individual alleles. They're a whole suite. How do we kickstart Mother Nature and help her along? Because like if you look at almost any disease, specifically CWD, that the population and fawn recruitment outperforms the prevalence or death loss from the disease, right? How do we, because Mother Nature doesn't care, right? She looks at a disease and she says, all I have to do is keep 51% of these animals alive. Well, that might take hundreds of generations to work through that. And then you're always dealing with this challenge. And so when we as conservationists and hunters and farmers look at this, we can say, okay, like, number one, we don't want to wait. We want to keep the prions off the landscape, right? Because they do last for decades and they don't degrade easy. Let's kickstart this. And so we have these technologies now that allow us to do it. Oklahoma's still working. Like, I don't think a deer has been released in Oklahoma yet. I think the bill passed. Well, I know the bill passed, and they had like basically 2 years to kind of develop the program to see what that's like. But like that was interesting because like the legislator said, you know what, this is important. Ag, wildlife, farmers, you all have to work together to figure this out. We're giving you the tools to do it. And like I thought that only in Oklahoma, right? You got 66 counties there. They're all red. They're conservative. They care, right? They care about their whole culture there. And they were like, hey, we're going to work together on this big problem. And there's cooperation. Now it's rare to see that anywhere, right? Like it's not something that happens. And right or wrong, the fact that they are working on it, I think is a novel approach. So it's a good thing.
I really encourage it though. Like I think, and I'm not a geneticist, but I do know that at least somebody's trying something that has potential to be a long-term solution, because the game agencies aren't. So I mean, and hopefully, and if they get it right, I'm glad they're doing it, and I hope they do it quickly. Even though like I'm always like I'm skeptical on a lot of things though.
Sure.
I'm glad that they're doing it, and I want to see what the results are, because then other states can copy it if it works.
Yeah, and that's the model moving forward. I actually think I think it puts Oklahoma in one of the best positions in the country for this kind of flywheel effect, right? So the advantage of having healthy, disease-resistant animals to chronic wasting disease, there's also a tie to EHD. And so you're getting lots of natural selection. Like if you look at EHD spread over the years from south to north, the southern animals are far more resistant to that disease, right? Like when it pops up into Ohio, well, you guys just went through one of the worst EHD years, right? So if you had, I'm just using South Texas, if you had a whole bunch of South Texas animals in Ohio, most of them would still be living, because for, hundreds of years, they've just encountered the disease, and the weak ones die. The ones that make it through the disease, they have natural immunity and they can reproduce and pass on that genetic trait. So like there's studies going on right now that are working to kind of tie the genetic component of chronic wasting disease susceptibility or resistance and EHD.
That's interesting.
So we're getting those metrics. And so the backbone of that Oklahoma stocking program was from Dr. Christopher Seabury at Texas A&M. He developed the genetic work on that, and he's the guy, right? He's like a world-renowned expert in genetics. Like that's what he does. Like there's he's the guy that came up, good or bad, right? He's the guy that allows dairy cows to pump out 30 gallons of milk a day. He's the guy that tailored the genetic testing for that. So he just took that over into the CWD space. Well, he's working on the EHD stuff right now. That's coming. Like, and so like all these things are happening behind the scenes, and I think it's going to have a huge impact. And Oklahoma is going to be a destination state because they're going to put themselves in a position to have the best deer. They're going to have deer that are healthier. They're going to have better antlers. They're just going to be more of them because they live. And Oklahoma, like if you've been to Oklahoma, like Eastern Oklahoma is nice. And I'm not knocking anybody in Western Oklahoma, okay? But it's rough country, right? It's like West Texas. That's a pretty inhospitable place. If you're a deer and you can live there, my goodness, like kudos to you, because like it's hard. So I'll get off my soapbox on the the genetic side. What when you look at wildlife agencies, what do you think? Why do you think that? Or it appears to me, why do you think that there's a loss of trust in these agencies?
That was one of the first questions I asked Jason Sumners, and I asked him directly. I said, I feel that there's a disconnect between you guys and the average everyday hunter. And at first, if you listen to that interview, at first he's like, yeah, he's like, I agree with. He agreed at first, and then I kept pushing on him. I kept pushing and pushing. He's like, no, I think there's a lot of agreement here. I don't see that in any way based on what I've seen. Obviously we get a lot of views. I get a lot of opinions. A lot of people call me. I think it's twofold, and part of it's not fair. If you've been given a ticket for poaching, people tend to be against the game wardens, and then in turn against the politicians that are in charge of them. And I don't think that's entirely fair. If you made a mistake and you got a ticket, being against the scientists isn't necessarily fair. But the bigger problem here is, like I said at the beginning, where they don't talk to us. It's like they're in their elite tower up looking down on all of us as ordinary everyday guys. And when someone like me comes out and says, hey, any one of you can write on my platform, call me, tell me where I'm wrong, let's talk about this, and they just refuse to even have a conversation with us, well, of course we're not going to trust them. If I don't trust people who are unwilling to talk to me. And that, I think, is the biggest. And look, there's a guy, he works for Pope and Young, Justin Springs, great guy. He's a biologist too. And I talked to him about this. And he was the first person to say it. He goes, yeah, biologists and scientists have a hard time communicating with people. And I agreed with that. I said, okay, that's fair enough. But what about like people that are running these game agencies? Those are politicians. They're great at talking to people, but they don't. Why not? And the trust issue is completely, in my opinion, I mean, think about your own marriage. I mean, if you don't talk and nobody knows what's going on with each other, there's going to be a lack of trust. And I think that's the biggest problem, is just a lack of communication to the ordinary, just the normal guy like me, like you, like so many of us out there listening to this. Yeah, we're just like some of us are super experts, and there's probably biologists listening to this. I'm not talking about them. Yeah. Just your ordinary guy that just, like you said, takes a week off to go hunting. Like, this was my dad. My dad was the ordinary guy. He took off 1 week, shot a deer with a shotgun, drug it in, skinned it, quartered it up, and ate it, right? Like, that's like those people never having communication with the ordinary guy. What do you think's going to happen? So that's my opinion.
Yeah. I'm going to swing that right back into the NDA conversation and the funding. So do you think the wildlife agencies looked at this and say, we don't want to do the communication, or better yet, we need another trust authority figure, if you will, to be, number one, our bulldog, say things we can't say, and number two, try to promote our message? Like, do you think that's a viable path that they presented, or do you think it's perhaps something more nefarious, or just not?
I wouldn't say nefarious, but I think that there's no incentive for them to talk to us at all. I mean, what's the incentive? It's like talking to us doesn't do anything for what they want. So they stick with talking to the politicians, like we talked about earlier. They're at the fundraisers, they're at these fancy dinners, they're talking at those places with the people giving them money. And why come talk to me? What's their incentive? I mean, to get the message out there, they're already getting their way. If they're getting their way, why talk to us? And I think that the only way that changes is through pressure, like the two things we talked about, whether it's political pressure or just even like what I'm doing on Facebook. Like, I know that one Facebook page writing about this or one podcast isn't going to do it, but there's 10 podcasts talking about it now. There's, 5 Facebook pages. There's a bunch of us that are saying, hey, you gotta listen to us. We have bigger platforms than you guys now. And it's causing enough social pressure that hopefully they do assign someone to be a communication. I would like to see this in Ohio. In fact, you know what? This is very interesting. I'm glad you brought this up. I'm going to propose this to some of those state politicians that I know. Have a communication czar for the average everyday hunter to talk to us. Somebody that where we can be heard and we can directly see the results of you listening to us. I'm not going to hold my breath on it, but with enough pressure, they might have to listen to us. But we've got to force the issue because there's just no incentives right now.
Yeah. You mentioned like your platform and podcasting and one Facebook page, not making a difference. And I'm going to push back on you because you and I wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for your Facebook page or your writings and your engagement on this issue. So I appreciate it. I saw it, and there's obviously millions of people that do see it. Getting them to speak up, like, that's a different story. But I can understand that.
That's the next step, though. The next step is getting people to speak up, I think. Because like I said a minute ago, 5 people message a state rep or a state senator, and they're going to start asking questions right away. And so it doesn't take much from where we're at right now to actually getting them to listen to us, I think. So I think that you're right. You're right. It does make a difference, but it takes a bunch of people to make the real difference that we want.
So on the CWD front, there's been almost, I call it cracks in the program or cracks in the armor, right? So you've had this united front of conservation groups and wildlife agencies pushing this kind of full-scale narrative of CWD, and that's a generalized statement, but the policies around it. And the two things that I saw recently that gave me a little hope that guys like yourself are making progress on was number one, like PGC here in our state lifted its ban on using natural urine products.
Nice.
Okay, right? Like that's the first since 2012 when CWD showed up here in the state. It's the first time I've seen them walk something back. The second was MDC canceling their after season call program. And
that's a big one.
That's a huge one. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? Because like I saw that and I was like, I was shocked. I was totally shocked when they were like, emergency meeting, we're canceling this. Like, what?
Yeah, I listened to what Jason Sumner's had to say about that, and he's again, politician.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to say that it's because people weren't participating, and to me, it's like, well, there's two cases. Maybe people weren't participating. That tells me that people aren't willing to work with you on this anymore, which is even better sign for us.
Yes.
Or it's just not working. It's one of those two. It's either not working or the hunters are going, nah, we're not buying into this anymore. And so they had to cancel it through pressure because maybe it was through, I guess my page does have some influence there. And so does your podcast. I think that, that is that does show some cracks. And I know that, what was the state? Wisconsin, I think, reversed some of their policies as well. So we're starting to see it go down that path. But, I'm just so skeptical of the government doing what I want that I worry that it's not going to continue,
Yeah. No, it was, I see those things and it's just encouraging to see. Like, to me, I thought it was common sense, right? Like,
yep.
Finally, they backed off, and the hunters. My take is the hunter said, "You're not killing 3,000 to 5,000 of our deer. We're already struggling in hunting season. We want to enjoy this, and if you kill these deer, we're not going to have deer here in the coming years, right?" And so, I think it's just the first time I've seen a major reverse course on a game agency and that kind of call after hours call program, if you will, which I still don't understand. Like I've seen the maps of the deer and the family group and the whole thing. And I don't get it. And you mentioned like, if the genetics are changing, right? Like, why are we going to kill the ones with the good genetics? Because you don't know. Right. Mm-hmm. Like it just doesn't make sense.
Well, I want to add one thing on this.
Sure.
I think that, and this is to the almost kind of the defense of the game agencies a little bit, is I think they're looking at this problem and going, look, if we don't do anything and this is a problem, then we can look really bad, lose our jobs. I mean, they get run out of their whole careers fast. If they do something and it turns into a big nothing burger, which it's looking to be more and more every single day, mm-hmm. well, then they continue to keep their job. They can. There's no negative consequence. Again, it goes down to incentives. People respond to incentives, and they have no incentives to listen to the hunters. And if they're wrong, there's no consequences. If they're right, then they're the hero. So I think that that's probably the driving, because I don't want to say that it's something nefarious. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people that the talking point I see all the time is they want to control the food. It's the car insurance companies.
Yeah, I don't see that at all.
I don't either. And I don't want to, even if it's true, I'm not, unless I had proof, I wouldn't say it.
Sure.
So I just don't think that they have the incentives to listen or to do anything other than what they're doing.
Yeah. I'm going to jump around because like this just popped into my head. We're talking about funding a little bit, and I hate to keep bringing up NDA because I think, to your point, their relevance with hunters continues to decline. But I look at that, I'll call it incestual nature of how government agencies and these NGOs are relating with each other. So like previously, our executive director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission was on the board of NDA, and that, like I see these really nicely produced full feature videos on YouTube from NDA pushing like game commission policy, and like the logos are there, and I'm like, I know what it costs to edit videos. I know you do. That stuff, like to do really nice stuff, is really expensive.
Yes.
Tens of thousands of dollars one video. And I looked at that and I was just like, where's that money coming from? And then like that set me off. And then I started looking through the directors and I'm like, these are all executive directors of the wildlife agencies.
Yep.
So like, I felt like it was just this extension of wildlife agencies with no oversight. Did you see something similar to that?
Yes. So that's again, back to Jason Sumner's. This is how I got the interview with him. He's a board member for National Deer Association. Mm-hmm. So is I believe it's the former officer of Alabama, maybe, he is one of the board members. So their board members are just a bunch of game agency people that are being put on the board. And those same game agencies are giving money to the National Deer Association. And you run a podcast. Mm-hmm. You obviously want to grow it and those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. National Deer Association, I didn't even know they had a podcast. They do. Yeah. The federal, I got this through some FOIA requests. They got $200,000 for their podcast. Like what? Wow. Like what? Yeah, I can show you the government documents. It's public data. They got $200,000 just given to them to run a podcast for outreach. Now, is that wasted dollars that should be spent on things for hunting? Absolutely. I mean, that didn't do any good. The podcast it's like Deer Hunting 365 maybe. Mm. And I was like, so you're trying the whole objective, because and when you look up these government documents, they have to have measurables. And I'm waiting on these emails to come back through my FOIA requests, but their measurables are getting new people into hunting. So I got $200,000 to get more people into hunting from a podcast that, one, does push CWD policy stuff and talks about the more intricate parts about hunting, like a guy who's been hunting for a long time would want to listen to, even though there's a ton of podcasts out there that aren't getting government money. So why? So it's just government funded. It's government people on their board. It's a propaganda wing. National Deer Association is a propaganda wing for these game agencies. That's what it is now. It's not representative of hunters, of the everyday guy anymore.
What do you think some changes, like if let's just say Steven Ziegler is in charge of the U.S. policy on chronic wasting disease and deer management. What does that look like for you? What are some of the give me maybe three of the big things that like you think, just based on your engagement with your followers, that would be important and have significant change?
Well, I would take away all this money going to NGOs. I'd give it straight to, some of it straight to not government agencies, studies. Like let's do some studies. I'm fine with that. Like let's study the genetics. Let's do some real studies. I would make sure that none of the game agency officials are allowed to move on to these NGOs and get huge salaries, which is what's happening with the guy from Alabama. I wish I could remember that guy's name. As soon as he retires, he goes over and gets a $300,000 a year salary at a government funded NGO for hunting. And the measurables on that are deer outreach too. So, I mean, this guy gets over $250,000 salary plus all of his benefits. I would stop all of that. Like hunter dollars should be going towards hunting policy. I would also eliminate all of the Pittman-Roberts money that is being given, because our Pittman-Roberts money is going to refunding these states for their testing of CWD. I'd eliminate all of that. And as far as CWD goes, the standard would have to change from, hey, you guys get to just make these policies, to these policies have to be justified before you implement them. Like there needs to be, not just scientific consensus, but consensus among the average everyday guy too. Like you said earlier, I'm not for ballot box biology, but the hunters who are on the landscape, we have a lot of information. I talked to Jason Sumner's about this. He's like, this guy doesn't see any deer. He thinks there's no deer, even though the deer population's up. And there's some truth to that. But there still has to be input from the hunters on this, because they have a lot of good, valuable information. And I'd also bring in the Deer Farm Association, the people from there that I've talked to, and we'd all work together. and we'd stop just funneling money to propaganda wings of these game agencies like the National Deer Association. I'd eliminate that first. That'd be the first thing I would do. And then I would say, listen, until you can justify these, we're going to let nature take its course, and we're not going to let the game agencies just kill all the deer to save them. Those would be the things that I would do. Increase studies, eliminate the NGO money, and try to and you know what? Let me add one more in there that you brought up earlier, is have some sort of communications czar for every state with the hunters. That'd be the other thing, specifically regarding CWD policy. Those would be the ones that I would do right away.
I like that. You'll like this. You mentioned Pittman Robertson. So I kept looking at the testing in Pennsylvania from PGC, and I was just like, they keep every time, like I've testified for our Deer Association alongside of the executive director of, Pennsylvania Game Commission. And so I listen, and then if I need to add anything in, I can do that. And usually they just do their normal bit. But every time they go in there, they're like, hey, we're broke. And then I just chuckled to myself about the $600 million slush fund.
Right.
and they're like, we're spending, $1 million to $2 million a year on chronic wasting disease. And they say the word management. I'm like, okay, yeah, management. What is management? You mean testing, surveillance, right? So you find out where the disease is. So I'm like, where's this money coming from? So I send over an RTK or a FOIA request, and they sent me their numbers. So I asked for all the funding in Pennsylvania since CWD showed up in 2012. And then I looked at it and I was like, this isn't right. This can't be right. So they spent about $24 million. I said, how much of that is federal and how much of that is state? Take a guess.
Based on what I saw recently, I would say that probably 70 to 80% might be the federal, especially with Pittman Roberts money. That's what I would have thought.
$22 million from the feds and $2 million from the state.
Even more.
They're not even spending their own money, and they're claiming they're broke. So like, I look at that and I'm just like, it's just so disingenuous to me. Right. And like, if we were getting something for that money, like if we were getting something substantive other than a map of Pennsylvania with a bunch of dots on it, I'd be like, cool. But all we get is that and call programs. And I can't get behind that. I need something more. Like, do something creative, try something novel, engage with, regional communities, right? Take a couple counties where CWD is. Say, what do you want as hunters, right? Come up with a program. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not the guy on that, but like, I could just imagine, to your point, like a communications person to engage these people. It'd be incredible. Okay, so I want to do some rapid fire with you.
All right.
Is CWD the biggest threat to deer hunting?
No. It's recruitment. It's recruitment in our kids. I'm not too worried about CWD.
Are wildlife agencies listening to hunters?
Absolutely not. And maybe worse now than ever.
What's the biggest myth about CWD?
Oh man, that's a little bit tougher. The biggest myth. That amongst regular hunters, everyday guys, I think that CWD is just a myth in general. They just that they have a solution, that there's any sort of possible solution, maybe it would be it at this point.
What issue in hunting gets ignored the most?
Ignored the most? I would say in Midwestern states, it's public land issues. In Western states, I wouldn't know. Yeah. Maybe. I wouldn't know about Western states, but the Midwest states, it's definitely public land issues.
I'm just curious. I'm going to get off the rapid fire for a second. Do you know how many acres of public land are in like Ohio?
I did at one point. It's like one of the lowest states. We have Wayne National Forest, and then we have that's the big one. That's like the only national forest we have. It's not a lot, and it's mostly all in the south. Like the southern part of the state has almost. If you're in the northern half of the state here in Ohio, I mean, it's little plots of land here and there.
They're like public parks you can walk in or something.
Yep.
They might even be locally owned.
Yeah.
Interesting. What is I guess should hunters question wildlife policy often?
They should. I mean, they should question it often and push back on everything. The game agencies should want pushback, and we should give it to them.
Yeah. So I want to close out with this question, and it's more of an opportunity for you to engage with the general audience. If you could send one message out to hunters across the country right now today, what would that be?
It'd be to get involved on the political level, and it doesn't even have to be hard. It's the easiest thing. Just find out who your state rep or your state senator is. It's a quick Google search. Find them on Facebook, send them a message, and tell them that you don't feel like you're being listened to. And it does not take very much to get these politicians' attention. I know that from working with them. As soon as they see any sort of pushback, if they think politicians trade in the currency of votes. A lot of times money buys those votes, volunteers buy those votes. That's their currency, is how do I keep getting elected? And if they think that this is going to cost them votes, they will immediately, because most of the politicians down in Columbus where I'm at are not hunters. And they represent hunters. Like even State Rep Heidi Workman, who I work for, she's not a hunter. I mean, she shoots and she's pro wildlife, but she doesn't know the more nuanced details of that. So when she has a question about wildlife policy, she calls me. So now I have some influence there because she trusts my opinion and she knows I'm going to give her good information. And if people, and you find some politicians, they'll listen more than people think. A politician might not even message you back, but if you send them a Facebook message and you get 5, 10 of them, they're going to be real hesitant to just give those wildlife agencies all the money they want. So that'd be the main thing I would tell them to really push. That's where you can make the most difference. And also just keep pushing back on social media. That social media pressure, even if you just have 100 followers or a couple hundred followers, or a podcast that's growing like yours or my pages, like everybody makes a bit of a difference. And it seems kind of cliche to even say that, but it's true.
Yeah, for sure. Where can people find more about what you do?
You can check out Rack Junkies on Facebook. Most of my stuff is on, I do have a YouTube page, but, we only got like 30,000 subscribers. I don't do a lot on there. But I have a Rack Junkies podcast to kind of go into more detail because, and this is something I didn't cover with Rack Junkies. When I write in 1 or 2 paragraphs at a time because people don't have attention. Sure. And there's a lot of people that want the details. So I'm bringing that up on the Rack Junkies podcast. I'm not really interviewing people. It's not, it's not monetized, none of that. So you can either follow me on Rack Junkies on Facebook, the Hunting News, the Sportsman Party. And then again, I have DeLong Lures is a fishing lure company. If people want to check it out, they can.
Stephen, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and sharing your insights. I appreciate the work you do, and I hope you keep doing it.
I'm going to definitely keep doing it, and hopefully people on the other side will reach out and start talking to all of us. Hopefully they'll come on your podcast too.
Yep. I appreciate it. And with that, stay tuned for another episode of the Deer Wizard Podcast.